Welcome to RipsTattoo and Podcast. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Johns Hopkins University, Johns Hopkins Medicine. And I recently just found this out, just scrolling through the web, trying to do some research on maybe some upcoming topics. I came across this, and it's funny. I noticed, and I'm sure a lot of you else have noticed, that not too long ago, a few years ago, that mushrooms you can now buy in head shops. You know, where I go buy my vapes and where you guys go buy your vapes and your tobacco and all that and your pipes and your Delta 8. Well, yeah, they were also selling psilocybin mushrooms. Now we'll dig deeper into it to see, like, Delta 8. Well, was that really marijuana? Or was it chemically engineered marijuana? So we're gonna dive deep into the psilocybin and hallucinogen realm. So will you come with me on this journey? Okay, Johns Hopkins Psychiatry and Behavioral Science did some research on psychedelics and psilocybin therapy. Now, from what it looks, is they've been doing it for quite a while. And we're going to do a quick overview of this. So a little bit about Johns Hopkins. I got to switch my cup here. All right. The Johns Hopkins Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research is leading the way. Consciousness again? What's that? That's been floating around the web a lot lately, especially on YouTube. In exploring innovative treatments using psilocybin, the molecular structure of psilocybin, a naturally occurring psychedelic compound found in magic mushrooms, allows it to penetrate the central nervous system, and the scientific and medical experts are just beginning to understand its effects on the brain and mind and its potential use in therapeutics for mental illnesses. Okay. It says here, backed by $55 million funding, researchers build on previous work and expand research on psychedelics for illness and wellness. 1. To develop new treatments for a wider variety of psychiatric and behavioral disorders with the aspiration of treatments tailored to the specific needs of individual patients. And 2. To expand research in healthy volunteers with the ultimate aspiration of opening new ways to support human thriving. All right, let's dig deeper. Psilocybin research and potential. Roland Griffiths, PhD, presented a TED-Med talk in 2015 about the therapeutic and consciousness potential of psilocybin. Research to date demonstrates safety of psilocybin in regulated spaces facilitated by a medical team over a series of guided sessions, and is a part of the cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Psilocybin helps in reducing anxiety in some cancer patients and in a facilitating smoking cessation for some. Neuroscience of psychedelic drugs, music, and nostalgia. Controlled psychedelic substances, there is a potential to alter the entire brain for a period of time and thus provide relief from negative emotions that cloud the mind. Capturing this controlled relief, Dr. Frederick Barrett's research suggests that under the right conditions, psychedelics may have the potential to treat a wide range of mood and substance disorders. I'm all for it. I'm all for it, guys. Yeah, let's do it. I mean, if you can get us off these drugs and these big farm, for making all this money, and I just recently stopped taking so many of my medications because they want to put you on this for anxiety and this one for depression and this one for pain and that one for this and this one for bipolar and this one for insomnia and by the end of it you're taking 20 different drugs. And so if we can get that minimized into just taking like one thing, I mean, can't they just mix it all together and just make one pill that you take and you're just... No, everybody's got to have their hand in a piece of the pie. Everybody's got to have their fingers in it. They could probably do that, make like one pill and it work for everything. But why would they? Why would they when there's millions to make? We don't care about the people. People live, people die. It's the circle of life. The circle of life, and it moves us all. Or is it? I mean, they're finding out a lot of shit in consciousness. What do you believe? All right, moving on, guys. So, then I found this.
All right, I know. Psychedelics. First thing you think of is trippy, drugs from the 60s and rave parties in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They have long been criminalized, but in recent years, there's been a push to study them to treat mental health disorders.
Yeah, senior health correspondent Monica Robbins explains the history of these mind-altering substances and why they may be the answer for a lot of people who are struggling.
What a long, strange trip it's been for psychedelics. Ancient cultures relied on natural substances like peyote, ayahuasca, and psilocybin from mushroom. Fast forward to the 20th century, science discovers MDMA or ecstasy and LSD. But by the 70s, despite extensive federal research, the government begins criminalizing psychedelics.
People's minds get opened up and they question the structures that exist, the institutions that exist.
By the 21st century, with depression and anxiety rates skyrocketing, new research begins, using psychedelics for mental health disorders.
PTSD, depression, and treatment-resistant depression have all been given breakthrough therapy status by the FDA, meaning that the evidence is so strong that they are kind of green-lighting and fast-tracking those substances through the approval process.
That was just a snippet of kind of what's to come, what I'm about to show you. All right. In 2000 is when the regulatory approval to resume psychedelics research began. A group of Johns Hopkins researchers was the first to obtain regulatory approval in the United States to resume research with psychedelics in healthy volunteers who had no previous experience with psychedelics. Yeah, how many of them really had no previous experience with psychedelics, man? Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I never tried a mushroom ever. They got people showing up there with dreadlocks and shit and fucking, pants below their knees and never tried it. No, what are you talking about? They're on psychedelics when they went there for the interview. But no, really, I'm sure there are a few. But anyways, moving on. Approval happened in 2000 to resume psychedelic research. So then in 2006, there was a milestone study launching the revival of psilocybin research. There it is, guys. Mushroom research in 2006. Alright, it says here, the publication psilocybin can occasion mystical type experiences having substantial and sustained personal meaning and spiritual significance on the safety and enduring positive effects of a single dose of psilocybin is widely considered the landmark study that sparked a renewal of psychedelic research worldwide. Give mystical type experiences having a substantial and sustained personal meaning and spiritual significance. So, what that's saying is they wanna find out the experience you have, whether it's mystical, or spiritual. Basically, that's what they're trying to find out. So that happened in 2006. So then what happened in 2008? Then there was guidelines. There were set guidelines for safety. So obviously from 2000 to 2006, there may have not have been, or actually 2007, there may not have been the best probably safety guidelines. Maybe there were some people that were getting hurt, or maybe they should look into the safety of, you know, their volunteers before maybe giving them this stuff. Interesting. It's like, let's figure that out after we've already been doing this for 6 years, you know. It's only 6 years of their life, right? It's only half of their brain that's rotted away by now. Interesting. So, guidelines for safety, where the center's team emphasizes safety as a cornerstone of psychedelics research. These recommend techniques in this publication, Human Hallucinogen Research Guidelines for Safety, have been adopted by others in the field. Okay, so they've developed some guidelines. All right, moving on. So then, from 2008 till 2014, 6 years later, must be the magic number 6, magic mushrooms, get it, magic number. Magic mushrooms help longtime smokers quit. So in 2014, they been doing this research and they found that, hey, this is helping out guys that have been smoking for 50 years. Dude, I'm all for it. Let's do it. Johns Hopkins researchers report that a small number of longtime smokers who had failed many attempts to drop the habit did so after controlled and monitored by the use of psilocybin, the active hallucinogenic agent in so-called magic mushrooms, in the context of a cognitive behavioral therapy program. So, you know, if they take these magic mushrooms and they do this CBT treatment program, then it's helped longtime smokers quit, basically is what happens. So then what happens in 2016? In 2016, psilocybin eases existential anxiety in people with life-threatening cancer. In a small double-blind study, Johns Hopkins researchers report that a substantial majority of people suffering cancer-related anxiety or depression found considerable relief for up to 6 months from a single large dose of psilocybin, the active compound in hallucinogenic magic mushrooms. So you're telling me in a single large dose of psilocybin, people suffering anxiety and depression for up to 6 months? That is freaking huge, man. Like, you know how much anxiety and depression those that suffer with cancer go through? They're in remission, they're not, remission, not. I mean, it's like in and out of that. I mean, that would drive me nuts. I mean, I've never had cancer. My heart goes out to those that suffer with cancer. I've had family members with cancer. I've had friends die from cancer. So I know the effects it has on the family. And my heart goes out to you guys. And if there's a drug out there that can ease that anxiety and that depression, man, I'm all for it. I am all for it. And from what I've heard, and I don't know if we'll find out in this paper here, it's the first time reading it, but I don't think the long-term effects, or I don't even know if you can overdose on mushrooms or DMT or any of these psychedelic drugs. I mean, I'm sure you probably can, but I really haven't heard anything about it. Like I haven't really heard about any cases where people, you know, overdose from too many mushrooms, right? Oh man, guy dies. He took one hit of DMT and he went off to space, just disappeared. Left his body, never came back. That would be cool. I think a lot more people would be doing it. No, but so that happened in 2016. All right, so then something happens in 2018. Let's find out. In 2018, they reclassify recommendation for psilocybin. So there was a reclassification. So what does that mean? What does the reclassification mean? Let's find out. In an evaluation of the safety and abuse research on the drug and hallucinogenic mushrooms, Johns Hopkins researchers suggest that if it clears phase 3 clinical trials, psilocybin should be recategorized from a Schedule 1 drug with no known medical potential to a Schedule 5 drug, such as prescription sleep aids, but with tighter control. Okay. So they know it helps out with cancer patients with their anxiety and their depression, right? And so they have to reclassify it, but they make it in a form of a known prescription sleep aid. You know, I wonder why that is. Why not just for anxiety or depression? Huh. Makes you think. What do you guys think? All right, moving on. So then in 2019, so in 2019, psychedelic use may lead to treatments for alcohol abuse. Online survey of over 300 people with alcohol use disorders reported reducing or abstaining alcohol use after taking a psychedelic drug such as psilocybin, LSD, or DMT. This study adds to growing evidence for supporting further investigation of psychedelic-assisted treatment for alcoholism or substance abuse. Mind you, they said for substance abuse as well. So with the growing evidence is what they're saying here is that with the psychedelic-assisted treatment, this can cure your alcoholism or substance use addiction? Is that what that means? Oh. Then under that in 2019, this also happened. Johns Hopkins launches Center for Psychedelic Research. A group of private donors has given $17 million to start the Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research at Johns Hopkins Medicine, making it what's believed to be the first such research center in the U.S. and the largest research center of its kind in the world. In the absence of federal funding for such therapeutic research in people, the new center will rely on the gifts announced today to advance the emerging field of psychedelics for therapies and wellness. Why did the federal government pull out?
The Fox 7 Care Force is brought to you by Advanced Pain Care.
In the Fox 7 Care Force, you may have come across some news articles talking about using psychedelic mushrooms or ecstasy as a treatment for post-traumatic stress. Well, how legitimate is this research and could it work? Joining us to talk about this is Natalie Ginsberg with the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS. Natalie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me here today.
You know, your group has been doing research on psychedelics as a treatment for post-traumatic stress. What have you learned so far?
Well, so far our results have been incredibly promising. Our most recent results indicated that 2/3 of study participants who entered our study qualifying as having PTSD according to their CAP score no longer qualified as having PTSD after our study. This, if you compare to Zoloft or Paxil, the other approved psychiatric treatment for PTSD, is around 50% effective in reducing symptoms, but not in eliminating them.
What is it about psychedelics that works?
So there are many theories, but one is that it really helps people address the root source of the trauma. That is to say, our study was actually with only 3 different sessions with MDMA. This is not something people are taking every day. So instead of really reducing the symptoms, it's kind of addressing where the trauma comes from.
How far is this from actually being introduced and used more mainstream by veterans?
We're just
the timeline.
We're in process of finishing our final phase of research. So we're looking at the next few years FDA approval, both for MDMA therapy and many other psychedelic therapies that are also being studied right now.
Would any sort of veteran qualify for this as far as who suffers with post-traumatic stress, or is it certain cases?
In our studies, if you qualify with PTSD, that would allow you to qualify for this study. There, are a few other things involved that doesn't automatically qualify you, but that would make you eligible to apply.
What is the future for this kind of treatment and this kind of research?
I hope the future is much more research. This is really actually the beginning. Though there's been research for decades, there's a lot more to understand because it really is approaching mental health in a little bit different of a way.
Okay, all right. We're out of time for now, but the research that your group is doing is fascinating, and hopefully it works and is effective for people. So, Natalie Ginsburg, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Why did the federal government pull their funding? Could it maybe be because they were healing people with alcoholism and substance abuse disorder? After hearing that newsreel, wouldn't you think the government would be in support of that? Is this another form to divert from trying to help those that are sick, that really struggle with addiction? Because the government doesn't want to help us get well. They keep us locked in this. They keep us locked under this umbrella. It's raining out. And so we put this umbrella on to deflect all that wet, nasty shit. And they know that I'm not gonna get wet. I'm gonna keep myself under this umbrella. So it's a control factor. What I think is they pulled out because people were maybe getting well and getting over their dependence to alcohol and drugs. But the system doesn't want that. And they're sure as hell not going to stick a bunch of money into it. Maybe the state, but not on the federal side. I'm from Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes. And they also say land of 10,000 treatment centers. It's probably true. Minnesota is one of the best states in the country for someone that struggles with addiction because you will get help. I just wish the rest of the United States would get on board. I wish the federal government got on board. Maybe start helping people. Don't be the problem. Help be part of the solution. How about that, government? God. So then in 2020, this happens. Psychedelic drug psilocybin tamps down brain's ego center. So the brain scans after psilocybin use showed that the colostrum was less active, meaning the area of the brain believed responsible for setting attention and switching tasks is turned down when on the drug. The researchers say that this ties in with what people report as typical effects of psychedelic drugs, including feelings of being connected to everything and reduced sense of self or ego. Man, let me guess. Your boss should be on this, right? Maybe slip a little on his coffee, a little psychedelic there, and his ego will go be deflated. Kill that damn ego. And further as we go down, let's see here, 2020, so that happens. Then in 2020, psychedelic treatment with psilocybin relieves major depression, studies show. Wow. Man, let's see what happens with these nuts. In a small study of adults with major depression, Johns Hopkins medicine researchers report that 2 doses of psychedelic substance psilocybin given with supportive psychotherapy produced rapid and large reductions in depressive symptoms, with most participants showing improvement and half of study participants achieving remission through the 4-week follow-up.
Behavioral therapy is based on the idea that certain situations trigger false core beliefs that negatively impact our thoughts, emotions, behavior, and physical reactions. Once we learn how to identify what situations bring upon such destructive thoughts, we can practice developing new interpretations that will then change our pattern of reaction. The therapy is widely used to help people with phobias, depression, anxieties, or addictions.
Here's a video just as a quick demonstration of what kind of therapy CBT is. So check this out. Thank you.
To show how it works, let's look at Lily, a teenage girl who hates going to school due to her fear of being judged and humiliated. In her first session, the therapist tries to build trust and explains how CBT functions, since the better Lily understands the process, the more likely it is that the therapy is effective. The therapist also illustrates how our brain, in specific situations, follows a fixed path of reason, which gets stronger after years of having the same thought process. Many of our destructive behaviors are based on false core beliefs, thoughts that objectively don't make sense. We acquired these false beliefs when we were too young to interpret others correctly. Throughout the therapy, Lily will try to unlearn these false beliefs and create new mental pathways that will replace the false beliefs she holds of herself with more realistic thoughts. Once Lily understands the process, the counselor begins to ask questions following the Socratic method, a form of argumentative conversation that stimulates critical thinking to draw out false ideas and underlying assumptions. "Would you like to tell me why you're here today?" starts the therapist. "Because I think I'm not normal," Lily responds. "You appear perfectly normal to me. Can you be more specific?" "I think I'm afraid of people." "So you are afraid of me?" "No." "Do you feel socially insecure?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "Tell me how you feel about school." "I'm scared of going because they think I'm stupid." Throughout the interview, the counselor takes notes of Lily's answers and identifies the signs of social anxiety based on a false core belief. Lily believes she is stupid. For a homework, Lily should practice introspection. The goal? To find out which situations trigger her negative thoughts. She gets a learning journal to keep records of all triggers and other observations, such as self-talk or interpretations of particular events and people. During the following week, Lily becomes more aware of her thoughts and the physical reactions they trigger. By paying attention to her feelings, she identifies a specific pattern which occurs every time during math class. The moment her teacher begins to ask questions, her heart starts racing and her palms get sweaty. She worries about having to answer the question, about making a mistake, about looking dumb in front of all the others. In her second session, Lily shares her observations and the therapist helps her realize that her cognitive behavioral patterns are false. First, her math grades are great, so she should feel anything but stupid. Second, she explains that there are always more interpretations to the same thing. What to her may look like her stupid face To others, she may just look unhappy about having to answer. The reason she is afraid of what people think is a form of social anxiety, a completely irrational cognitive behavioral response. As the sessions continue, the therapist suggests 3 practical strategies. Through journaling, Lily records her negative beliefs and reformulates them into positive ones she can replace them with. Constructive self-talk helps her to replace a critical voice with a positive one. And she starts exposure exercises, which means Lily deliberately puts herself in situations where she becomes the center of attention. Along the way, the 2 set goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. SMART goals give her control over how she progresses, thus helping her gain confidence in herself. Over time and with a lot of practice, her brain builds new neural pathways that lead to different, more neutral reactions to the same old triggers. And one day, Lily may even enjoy the thrill of speaking in front of her class. Her interpretation of the situation is more realistic and more aligned with those of the others. CBT was initially developed in 1964 by Aaron Temkin Beck. Beck hypothesized that people's feelings are determined by the way they interpret situations, rather than the situations per se. About depression, he once said, "If our thinking is bogged down by distorted symbolic meanings, illogical reasoning, and erroneous interpretations, we become, in truth, blind and deaf."
So there you go. That gives you an idea about that. So let's move on. I want to talk about my grandpa for a minute. Major depression. And I remember when he had it, it would go in swings. He would have really, he could be just the happiest person in the world. But man, when he went through his depression, his major depression, bro, you could not get him out of bed. He wouldn't eat. He would sleep all day long. He wouldn't want to do nothing. It's like he wasn't my grandfather anymore. Right? He just wasn't. And my mom cared for my grandpa so much. My grandpa passed last April on the 19th, 2024. But my mom took so much good care of my grandpa. And, when he was in this depressive cycle, it was just sad. He couldn't take care of himself. He couldn't think, he couldn't talk, he just lay there. And so, achieving remission through the 4-week follow-up, produced rapid and large reductions in depressive symptoms, with most participants showing improvements and half of study participants achieving remission. Snapping out of it, dude. Boom, depression. Bye-bye. Now, you hear the term remission. So what happened? Did it, did some of it come back even stronger? You don't know. Like what exactly could psychedelics do? Right? Did it come back? If it did come back, did it come back less? And so there's a button on here. You can hit the button and it says read news release. So then you can follow up and you can check on that. So like I said, I'll put that in the description for you guys. Okay. All right, moving on. So then now, in 2021, finally, first federal grant for psychedelic treatment research in 50 years. That is huge. It says here, Johns Hopkins Medicine was awarded a grant from the National Institutes of Health, NIH, to explore the potential impacts of psilocybin on tobacco addiction. This is the first NIH grant awarded in over a half-century to directly investigate the therapeutic effects of a classic psychedelic, consistent with a recent study published online that searched NIH funding and found 0 grants were awarded between 2006 and 2020. Johns Hopkins Medicine will lead the multi-site 3-year study in collaboration with the University of Alabama, at Birmingham and New York University. Wow. They come back. Man, this is actually helping people. Let's grant them some money so now we can get our fingers back in the pie. You know, we didn't want to help out the situation before, but you know, now that we know there's enough study behind it and there's enough evidence that we're not going to take a loss in this, that we're actually going to prosper and make money. Let's make money off the people. Now we'll offer a grant after you guys have gotten it all set up and did all your guys' studies and everything like that. Now, once it finally gets passed, whatever bill, whatever medical, whatever medicinal thing they got to pass to make sure it gets legal or they can turn it into a prescription form, now we're going to grant you, you know, all this money from the NIH. That's your government, y'all. Love them, hate them. Do ya? You love them or hate them? I don't know, man. Crooked. Crooked, rotten, crooked. That's as dirty, that's as crooked as you can get. That's your government. That's how they want to help. Only when it involves them, money, and you. When they see you, you're just a cash cow. It's like treatment. It's like at New Way. I just got kicked out of New Way Treatment Center in St. Cloud. And for what? A little bit of vape smoke got blown back into the building when I was leaving. That's no reason to, but you know what? They said that they could admit me again. Yeah. Discharge me and then offer admittance right away. That doesn't sound like the biggest scam. I don't know what is. Alright guys, so thanks for hanging in with me there. So 2021, the feds give us a grant, give them a grant. Then in 2022, here it is. So 2022, do the math. When mushrooms started showing up in your head shops. Psilocybin treatment for major depression may be effective for up to a year. Previous studies by Johns Hopkins medicine researchers showed that psychedelic treatment with psilocybin relieved major depressive disorder symptoms in adults for up to a month. Now, in a follow-up study of those participants, the researchers report that substantial antidepressant effects of psilocybin-assisted therapy given with supportive psychotherapy may last at least a year for some patients. Last for a year. Well, shit, keep doing it, man. Major depression, what is it? Major depressive disorder? That keeps people from working. That keeps families from eating. That keeps parents from doing their parental jobs. I know I have a friend that struggled with postpartum depression after having her third child. I mean, I could see it. I could see what it does to her. I can see what it takes out. Your kids are running around nuts. It just sucks. So, thank you, John Hopkins. Thank you for doing the research in this. Thanks for developing this. Thanks for finding out that, hey, this can actually help people and turn what was once called the Schedule 1 drug into a Schedule 5 to where now it can start being prescribed to those that really need it. I'm just wondering when a treatment's really going to come out for those struggling with substance abuse addiction and alcoholism addiction. So, I'm waiting for that day, guys. I don't know. I'm going to push this. Please subscribe, share, comment. Give me something. Give me whatever you want. Don't subscribe, don't share. don't matter. But if this pulled on your heartstrings, please like, hit the button, share. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Love ya. Namaste. Bye-bye.
2020, Oregon became the first state to legalize psilocybin-assisted therapy and decriminalize possession. Colorado followed. Several more states introduced legislation. Ohio's attempt never made it to a vote. Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers admitted using ayahuasca to, in his words, help support his mental and spiritual health.
I had a magical experience with the sensation of feeling 100 different hands on my body, imparting a blessing of love and forgiveness for myself and gratitude for this life from what seemed to be my ancestors.
While there is promise, there is still much more research to be done.
Just because a recreational drug has a potential effect in one area does not make it a solution for everything.
Previous clinical trials showed treatments may only require 2 or 3 doses spread over a few weeks, but they also require intense psychotherapy and at least 2 trained supervisors during the proverbial trip that could take several hours.
How are they credentialed, these allopathic guides? Do you need to take these substances to be credentialed?
Dr. Surma is concerned for those who may have a more religious experience.
Therapist who's very familiar with, say, Christianity, how would he, she, they respond to a transformative experience of a Hindu who has what one might call a Hindu mystical experience?
Currently, MDMA is showing promise for post-traumatic stress disorder and psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. Research shows the substances open pathways in the brain relating to memory and emotion.
So there's this term called quantum change, where it's really the pairing together of something spiritual and something insightful, and the combination of these experiences, when they happen simultaneously, might promote change in someone's experience of life.
This month, Australia became the first country to formally recognize the therapeutic uses of psychedelics, but it will not be the last.
So we're likely within 1 to 2 years at this point, based on what I can tell, for those drugs to be approved.